How populations grow. In the 1950s, a fish farmer in Florida tossed a few plants called hydrilla into a canal. Hydrilla was imported from Asia for use in home aquariums because it was hardy and adaptable. The few plants he tossed in reproduced quickly and kept on reproducing. Today, their tangled stems snag boats in rivers and overtake habitats. Native water plants and animals are disappearing. Why did these plants get so out of control? Is there any way to get rid of them? This is a hydrilla infestation in the Willacoochee River in Florida. The fish catch in New England has dropped dramatically despite fishermen's hard work and new equipment. The cod catch in a recent year was 3,000 metric tons. In 82, it was 57,000 metric tons, almost 19 times higher. Where did all the fish go? Can anything be done to increase their numbers? How do ecologists study populations? Researchers study populations with the following characteristics: geographic range, density and distribution, growth rate, and age structure. The stories of the hydrilla and cod both involve dramatic changes in the size of populations. A population is a group of organisms in a single species that live in a given area, such as the hydrilla population represented on this map of Florida in the 1950s, and then 60s, extended, and 70s, 80s, and a bit more in the 90s. The area inhabited by a population is called a geographic range. A population's range can vary enormously in size depending on the species. A bacteria population in rotting pumpkin may have a range smaller than a cubic meter, whereas the population of cod in the Western Atlantic covers a range that stretches from Greenland down to North Carolina. Humans have carried hydrilla to so many places that its range now includes every continent except Antarctica and is found in many places in the United States. Population density refers to the number of individuals per unit area. Populations in different species often have very different densities, even in the same environment. A population of ducks in a pond may have a low density, while fish and other animals in the same pond community may have higher densities. Distribution refers to how individuals in a population are spaced out across the range of the population, randomly, uniformly, or mostly concentrated in clumps. An example of population that is random distribution is purple lupine. These wildflowers grow randomly in a field among other wildflowers. Individual members of the population are spaced randomly. An example of a population that grows uniform distribution, or that's located in the uniform distribution, is the king penguin. The dots in the illustration represent individual members of a population with uniform distribution, basically spaced evenly apart. An example of a population that shows clump distribution is the striped catfish. These fish organize into tight groups. The dots in the illustration represent individual members of the population with clumped distribution. A population's growth rate determines whether the population size increases, decreases, or stays the same. Hydrilla populations in their native habitats tend to stay more or less the same size over time. These populations have a growth rate of around 0. They neither increase nor decrease in size. The hydrilla population in Florida, by contrast, has a high growth rate, which means that it increases in size. Populations can decrease in size like the cod. The cod population has a negative growth rate. To fully understand a plant or animal population, researchers need to know the population's age structure, the number of males and females of each age a population contains. Most plants and animals cannot reproduce until they reach a certain age of maturity. Also, among animals, only females can produce offspring. So what factors affect population growth? The factors that can affect population size are the birth rate, death rate, and the rate in which individuals enter, immigration, or leave, emigration. A population will increase or decrease in size depending on how many individuals are added to it or removed from it. Births will add, immigration will add, and then deaths will decrease the population, and immigration will decrease the population. A population can grow when its birth rate is higher than its death rate. If the birth rate equals the death rate, the population may stay the same size. If the death rate is greater than the birth rate, the population likely is to shrink. A population may grow if individuals move into a range from elsewhere, a process called immigration. A population may decrease in the size if individuals move out of a population's range, a process called immigration. So, what happens during exponential growth? Under ideal conditions with unlimited resources, a population will grow exponentially. If you provide a population with all the food and space it needs, protect it from the predators and disease, and remove its waste products, the population will grow. The population will increase because members of the population will be able to produce offspring, and after a time, those offspring will produce their own offspring. Under ideal conditions, with unlimited resources, a population will grow exponentially. In exponential growth, the larger a population gets, the faster it grows. The size of each generation of offspring will be larger than the generation before it. In a hypothetical experiment, a single bacterium divides to produce 2 cells every 20 minutes. After 20 minutes, under ideal conditions, the bacterium divides to produce 2 bacteria. After another 20 minutes, these 2 bacteria divide to produce 4 cells. After 3 20-minute periods, we have 2 times 2 times 2, we have 8 cells. Another way to describe the size of the bacteria population is to use exponents. 2 raised to the 3 cells is 3 20-minute periods. 3 20-minute periods would be double. In 2 hours, 6 20-minute periods, there will be 2 to the 6th, or 64 bacteria. In 1 day, this bacterial population will grow to 2 to the 72nd, or about 4.7 times 10 to the 21 individuals. If the growth rate continues without slowing down, this bacterial population would cover the planet within a few days. If you plot the size of the population on a graph over time, you get a J-shaped curve that rises slowly at first and then rises faster and faster. If nothing were to stop this kind of growth, the population would become larger and larger, faster and faster, until it approaches an infinite large size. That is exponential growth. Many organisms grow and reproduce much more slowly than bacteria. For example, a female elephant can produce a single offspring only every 2 to 4 years. Newborn elephants take about 10 years to mature. If exponential growth continues and all descendants of a single elephant pair survived and reproduced, after 750 years, there would be nearly 20 million elephants. Sometimes, when an organism is moved to a new environment, its population grows exponentially for a time. When a few European gypsy moths were accidentally released from a laboratory near Boston, these plant-eating pests spread across the northeastern these plant-eating pests spread across the northeastern United States within a few years. In peak years, they devoured the leaves of thousands of acres of forest. In some places, they formed a living blanket that covered the ground, sidewalks, and cars. What is logistic growth? It occurs when a population's growth slows and then stops, following a period of exponential growth. Natural populations don't grow exponentially for long. Sooner or later, something stops exponential growth. So what happens? Suppose a few individuals are introduced into a real-world environment. This graph traces the phases of growth that the population goes through. Initially low, population grows rapidly, exponentially, but then it slows and it comes up to a carrying capacity and then centers around that carrying capacity. During this phase, after a short time, the population begins to grow exponentially. Resources are unlimited, so individuals grow and reproduce rapidly. Few individuals die, and many offspring are produced. So both the population size and the rate of growth increase more and more rapidly. In real world situations, exponential growth does not continue for long. At some point, the rate of population growth begins to slow down. The population still grows, but the rate of growth slows down. So the population size increases more slowly. And at some point, phase 3, growth stops. The rate of population growth drops to zero and the size of the population levels off. Under some circumstances, the population will remain at or near this size indefinitely. This curve is an S shape that represents what is called logistic growth, the S shape. Logistic growth occurs when a population's growth slows and then stops, following a period of exponential growth. Many familiar plant and animal populations follow logistic growth curve. Populations grow more slowly for several reasons. Growth may slow if the population's birth rate decreases or the death rate increases, or if births fall and deaths rise together. In addition, population's growth may slow if the rate of immigration decreases and the rate of emigration increases, or both. When a birth rate and a death rate are the same, and when the immigration equals emigration, the population settles. There is a dotted line, a horizontal line, through the region of this graph where the population growth levels off. The point in which this dotted line intersects the y-axis represents the carrying capacity. Where it settles at this population is called the carrying capacity. Carrying capacity is the maximum number of individuals of a particular species that a particular environment can support. Once a population reaches the carrying capacity of its environment, a variety of factors act to stabilize it at that size.